Welcome to the Sleepy Bat. Tonight we're not talking about pharaohs or pyramids. We're going deeper into what really happened when the sun went down in ancient Egypt. Because while the tombs slept, the people danced. And what they did after dark might just surprise you. So lay back, close your eyes, and let the Nile breeze carry you. You're not in the present anymore. You're in a land of shadows, music, and secrets carved into the night. This is Egyptian nightlife. You've heard of King Tut's treasure. You've seen the golden masks and perfect hieroglyphs. But no one told you about the beer stronger than anything you've ever tasted, or the parties that made Vegas look like a monastery, or the music, the dancing, the taverns, the festivals that lit up entire cities. I'm talking about the side of Egypt the textbooks leave out, raw, unfiltered, chaotic. This isn't meditation and mummification. This is celebration. Wild, sacred, unforgettable celebration. And here's the thing nobody tells you. The Egyptians didn't just tolerate this stuff. They celebrated it. They built entire festivals around it. They wrote songs about it. They painted it on their walls. And some of the wildest parties in human history happened right there along the banks of the Nile, 3,000 years before anyone even thought to invent the weekend. Now I know what you're thinking. How do we even know about this stuff? Great question. Because for the longest time, archaeologists and historians were so focused on tombs and temples that they completely ignored the evidence of everyday life. But in the last few decades, we've uncovered tavern receipts, party invitations, drinking songs, and even ancient Egyptian hangover cures. Yes, those exist, and yes, we're going to talk about them, but here's where it gets really interesting. See, ancient Egyptian society was built around the Nile flood cycle. For months out of the year, when the river flooded and nobody could work the fields, entire communities essentially became massive party zones. We're talking about festivals that lasted for weeks, celebrations that involved entire cities, and entertainment that would make Burning Man look like a book club meeting. The evidence is everywhere once you know where to look. Tomb paintings that show musicians and dancers in positions that definitely weren't meant for family viewing. Papyrus scrolls with drinking games that are still played today. Archaeological sites where they've found massive brewing operations right next to what can only be described as ancient nightclub districts, and temple records that detail exactly how much beer and wine was consumed during religious festivals. Spoiler alert, it was a lot. But this isn't just about drinking and partying. This is about understanding a civilization that knew how to balance work and celebration in ways we're still trying to figure out. These people built monuments that have lasted 5,000 years, developed mathematics and medicine that form the foundation of modern science, and created art that still takes your breath away. And they did it all while maintaining a nightlife culture so vibrant and sophisticated that it puts most modern cities to shame. See, what most people don't realize is that ancient Egyptian religion wasn't the somber, death-focused system you see in movies. It was celebratory, joyful, ecstatic even. Their gods loved a good party. Their festivals were massive community celebrations. And their temples weren't just places of worship, they were entertainment complexes that hosted everything from musical performances to theatrical productions to events that, let's just say, would definitely require an age restriction today. Take the Festival of Opet, for example. This was a 3-week celebration that happened every year in Thebes. 3 weeks of non-stop festivities. We're talking about processions, performances, feasts, and enough alcohol to float a barge down the Nile. The entire city essentially shut down, and everyone from farmers to pharaohs participated in what can only be described as the ancient world's version of Mardi Gras, New Year's Eve, and Coachella, all rolled into one massive celebration. And that's just one festival. The Egyptian calendar was packed with these events. The festival of Bastet, where people traveled from all over Egypt to party in honor of the cat goddess. The festival of Hathor, which involved music, dancing, and enough wine to make the goddess of love and joy very, very happy. The festival of Min, which, well, let's just say it celebrated fertility in some very creative ways. But festivals were just the tip of the iceberg. Because between all these massive celebrations, Egyptian cities had thriving nightlife scenes that operated year-round. Taverns that served beer so strong it was basically liquid bread. Wine houses that imported the finest vintages from across the Mediterranean. Music venues where professional entertainers performed everything from religious hymns to songs so raunchy they make modern rap lyrics look like nursery rhymes. And the entertainment? Oh, we're going to talk about the entertainment. Because the ancient Egyptians invented forms of nighttime performance that were so innovative, so boundary-pushing, that archaeologists are still debating whether some of these activities even have modern equivalents. We're talking about theatrical productions that combined music, dance, storytelling, and audience participation in ways that would make modern immersive theater companies jealous. But here's what's really wild. This wasn't underground culture. This wasn't rebels acting out against stuffy religious authorities. This was mainstream Egyptian society. Pharaohs sponsored these events. Priests participated in them. Wealthy merchants competed to throw the most extravagant parties. And ordinary citizens saved up all year just to afford the best seats at the hottest entertainment venues. The social dynamics alone are fascinating, because unlike a lot of ancient cultures where nightlife was segregated by class or gender, Egyptian parties were remarkably inclusive. You'd find farmers drinking next to scribes, women performing alongside men, and entertainment that crossed every social boundary imaginable. These weren't exclusive elite gatherings. These were community celebrations where social rules got temporarily suspended and everyone was invited to participate. And we haven't even talked about the music yet. Oh, the music. The Egyptians didn't just have songs for their parties. They had entire musical genres dedicated to nightlife, drinking songs with lyrics so clever they still make you laugh 4,000 years later. Dance music with rhythms so complex that modern musicians study them for inspiration. Love songs that were so explicit they make your favorite R&B slow jam sound like a children's lullaby. The instruments alone tell a story. Harps, lyres, flutes, drums, sistrums, and dozens of percussion instruments we don't even have names for anymore. But here's the kicker. They didn't just play music, they amplified it. Archaeological evidence suggests that some Egyptian entertainment venues had acoustic engineering that rivals modern concert halls. These people understood sound, rhythm, and atmosphere in ways that would impress any modern party planner. But music was just the soundtrack. The real show was the performance, and Egyptian performers, both professional and amateur, developed forms of entertainment that pushed every envelope imaginable. We're talking about acrobatic dancing that defied gravity, theatrical productions that combined comedy and drama in ways that influenced theater for millennia, and performance art that was so ahead of its time it wouldn't look out of place in a modern avant-garde festival. The costumes, the makeup, the choreography, all of it was designed for maximum impact. These weren't casual performances, these were carefully crafted spectacles meant to transport audiences into completely different worlds. And the audiences participated. They didn't just sit and watch, they danced, they sang along, they became part of the show. And then there were the games, because no Egyptian party was complete without games. But we're not talking about simple dice or board games. We're talking about elaborate party games that combined skill, chance, and entertainment in ways that kept entire crowds engaged for hours. Some of these games were so popular that variations of them spread across the entire ancient world. But perhaps most fascinating of all is how the Egyptians treated their nightlife culture. This wasn't seen as separate from their spiritual or intellectual life. It was integrated into it. Their parties weren't escapes from reality. They were celebrations of reality. Their entertainment wasn't mindless distraction. It was sophisticated art that engaged with the deepest questions of human existence. The texts that survive from these celebrations aren't just party records. They're philosophical treatises on joy, community, and the meaning of life. The artwork isn't just decoration. It's complex visual narratives that tell stories about human nature, divine interaction, and the mysteries of existence. This is what makes Egyptian nightlife so remarkable. It wasn't just about having a good time. It was about creating experiences that brought communities together, challenged artistic boundaries, and explored what it meant to be human. And they did it all while maintaining one of the most successful civilizations in human history. But we're just getting started, because what I've described so far is just the surface level. The real stories, the ones that will completely change how you think about ancient Egypt, are still coming. We're about to dive into the specific venues, the legendary performers, the infamous parties that became the stuff of legend. We're going to explore the taverns where scribes and soldiers drank together until dawn, the music halls where the greatest performers of the ancient world perfected their craft, the private parties thrown by wealthy merchants that became so legendary people talked about them for generations. We're going to meet the entertainers whose names were known across the ancient world, the party hosts who became celebrities in their own right, the performers who pushed boundaries so far that their shows became the template for entertainment throughout the Mediterranean. And we're going to uncover the drinks, the food, the games, and the activities that made Egyptian nightlife the envy of the ancient world. Because trust me, we've barely scratched the surface of what these people got up to after dark. We're talking about taverns that operated like ancient entertainment complexes, places with names that archaeologists still debate translating because some of them are so provocative they'd make a sailor blush. The House of Life wasn't just a library, it was also where scribes went to unwind with drinks that could strip paint. The Golden Lotus served wine so potent that customers had to sign waivers written on papyrus promising not to hold the establishment responsible for anything they did after the third cup. These weren't your quaint neighborhood pubs. These were sophisticated operations with multiple floors, private rooms, and entertainment that ran from sunset to sunrise. The main floors featured live music and dancing, while upstairs rooms hosted everything from poetry competitions to games of chance that involved betting entire harvests. And the basement levels, well, let's just say that's where things got really interesting. The drink menus alone would blow your mind. Beer wasn't just beer in ancient Egypt. It was a craft that had been perfected over thousands of years. They had light beers for casual afternoon drinking, medium-strength brews for dinner, and festival-grade ales that were basically liquid courage in a cup. Some of these brews were so strong that tavern owners were legally required to dilute them before serving. But beer was just the beginning. Egyptian wine culture was incredibly sophisticated. They imported grapes from all over the Mediterranean, but they also developed their own varieties that grew in the Nile Delta. Date wine, fig wine, palm wine, and exotic blends that combined fruits we don't even cultivate anymore. Some of these wines were aged for decades and sold for prices that would make modern wine collectors weep. And then there were the cocktails. Yes, cocktails. The Egyptians were mixing drinks thousands of years before anyone thought to put an umbrella in them. They had recipes that combined wine with honey, spices, and herbs to create drinks that were part beverage, part medicine, part hallucinogenic experience. The recipe of Ra was a golden drink that supposedly made you see visions of the gods. The Tears of Isis was a blue concoction that was said to cure heartbreak and inspire creativity. The bartenders, or drink masters as they were called, were celebrities in their own right. These weren't just people who poured drinks. They were chemists, entertainers, and therapists all rolled into one. They memorized hundreds of recipes, knew exactly which drinks went with which entertainment, and could read a crowd better than any modern party host. Some of them became so famous that wealthy families would hire them exclusively for private events. But the drinks were just fuel for the real attraction, the entertainment. And Egyptian nighttime entertainment was unlike anything the world had ever seen. We're talking about performances that combined every art form imaginable into spectacles that lasted for hours. Musicians, dancers, acrobats, storytellers, and performers whose job descriptions don't even have modern equivalents. The musicians weren't just playing background music. They were creating immersive soundscapes that transported audiences into different worlds. A typical evening might start with gentle harp music during dinner, escalate to complex percussion ensembles during the dancing, and climax with full orchestral pieces that involved dozens of performers playing instruments that filled entire rooms with sound. The dancing was athletic, artistic, and absolutely fearless. Egyptian dancers trained for years to master moves that required incredible strength, flexibility, and coordination. They performed on elevated stages, suspended platforms, and sometimes even on boats floating in specially constructed pools inside the venues. The costumes were engineering marvels in themselves, designed to flow and sparkle and transform with every movement. But perhaps most impressive were the theatrical productions. These weren't simple plays. They were multimedia experiences that combined live performance with special effects that still seem impossible today. They had moving sets, costume changes that happened in seconds, and illusions that made audiences believe they were witnessing actual magic. Some productions required months of preparation and involved casts of hundreds. The stories they told weren't always religious or historical. Many were contemporary dramas about love, betrayal, adventure, and comedy that pushed every boundary of taste and decency. They had satires that mocked politicians, romantic comedies that would make modern screenwriters jealous, and adventure epics that included real animals, water effects, and stunts that would terrify modern insurance companies. And the audience participation was legendary. Egyptian entertainment wasn't something you watched passively. Audiences were expected to sing along, dance in their seats, and sometimes even join the performers on stage. The most popular venues had regular customers who knew all the songs, anticipated the plot twists, and became part of the show themselves. The gaming culture was equally sophisticated. Egyptians had gambling games that were so complex they required professional dealers to manage them. Senet wasn't just a board game. It was a full-contact sport that involved strategy, luck, and trash-talking that would make modern gamers proud. They had dice games with betting pools that grew so large they influenced local economies. But they also had party games that were designed purely for entertainment, truth or dare games that led to confessions and challenges that became the stuff of legend, drinking games with rules so intricate they required written instructions, dance competitions that turned into neighborhood rivalries that lasted for generations. The food served at these venues was as elaborate as everything else. This wasn't bar snacks. These were full culinary experiences designed to complement the entertainment and enhance the social atmosphere. Roasted meat seasoned with spices imported from across Africa and Asia. Fruits and vegetables prepared in ways that turned simple ingredients into works of art. Desserts that were almost too beautiful to eat. Some venues specialized in particular types of cuisine. The spice route served food so exotic that diners needed guidebooks to understand what they were eating. The river's edge featured fresh fish prepared tableside with theatrical flair. The desert bloom was famous for vegetarian dishes that were so creative they converted dedicated meat eaters. The service was as much entertainment as the food itself. Servers were trained performers who could juggle plates, tell jokes, and remember complex orders without writing anything down. Some venues employed professional food stylists whose only job was making sure every dish looked like a piece of art before it left the kitchen. But perhaps most fascinating was how these venues functioned as social institutions. They weren't just places to drink and be entertained. They were where business deals were made, marriages were arranged, political alliances were formed, and community decisions were reached. The tavern keeper often served as an unofficial mayor, mediating disputes and organizing community events. The social mixing was remarkable for its time. Wealthy merchants sat next to traveling laborers. Government officials shared tables with street performers. Women owned and operated many of these establishments, and female customers were not only welcome, but often comprised the majority of the clientele at certain venues. The networking that happened in these spaces influenced Egyptian society in ways that historians are still discovering. Artistic collaborations that began over drinks led to architectural innovations. Business partnerships formed during evening entertainment sessions created trade networks that spanned continents. Romantic relationships that started at these venues influenced political dynasties, and the cultural exchange was extraordinary. Egypt's location at the crossroads of Africa, Asia, and Europe meant that these nightlife venues attracted visitors from dozens of different cultures. The entertainment, food, drinks, and social customs were constantly evolving as new influences arrived from trading expeditions and diplomatic missions. The fashion shows alone were worth the price of admission. Egyptian clothing wasn't just functional, it was art that moved with the human body. Evening wear was designed specifically for nightlife activities, with fabrics that shimmered in torchlight, jewelry that chimed with movement, and accessories that transformed simple outfits into stunning visual displays. The makeup and hairstyling were equally elaborate. Both men and women spent hours preparing for evening entertainment, using cosmetics that were works of art in themselves. Kohl wasn't just eyeliner, it was applied in patterns that told stories. Hair was styled into sculptures that incorporated gold thread, precious stones, and aromatic oils that created personal signature scents. But we're still just warming up, because the most incredible stories haven't even started yet. We're about to dive into the specific events that became legendary, the performers whose names echoed through generations, and the parties that were so outrageous they influenced entertainment culture for thousands of years. We're talking about performers who became so famous that pharaohs competed to book them for private events. Musicians whose compositions were still being played centuries after their deaths. Dancers whose moves were studied and copied across the ancient world. And party hosts whose events became the template for celebration throughout the Mediterranean. Take Khayyam Wasset, known as the Golden Voice of Memphis. This wasn't just some local tavern singer. This was a performer whose voice could allegedly make grown men weep and whose love songs could convince the most stubborn heart to fall. He performed exclusively at the House of Seven Stars, the most exclusive venue in Memphis, where admission cost more than most people earned in a month. But here's the kicker. People saved for years just to hear him perform once. The stories about his performances sound like mythology, but the archaeological evidence backs them up. Papyrus records show that when Khayyam Wasset performed, the entire entertainment district would shut down because everyone wanted to crowd into his venue. Other musicians would cancel their own shows just to listen, and wealthy patrons would travel from other cities, sometimes bringing entire entourages just to experience what people called the voice that could charm the gods themselves. But Khayyam Wasset wasn't just a singer. He was a complete entertainer who understood that Egyptian nightlife wasn't about passive consumption. His performances were interactive experiences where the audience became part of the show. He'd pull people on stage, improvise songs about customers, and create moments that people talked about for decades. Some of his improvised lyrics were so clever they became popular songs that spread throughout Egypt. Then there was Nebet, the Queen of the Night, who ran the most notorious entertainment complex in all of Thebes. This wasn't just a venue, it was an empire. 3 floors, each with different types of entertainment, plus private rooms, gaming areas, and what can only be described as ancient Egypt's first dinner theater. Nabet didn't just book performers, she created entire entertainment experiences that lasted from sunset to sunrise. The main floor featured rotating acts throughout the night. Musicians from different regions playing fusion music that blended Egyptian traditional sounds with influences from Nubia, Libya, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Dancers who performed styles that required years of training and athletic ability that would impress modern gymnasts. Comedians who told jokes so risque that some of them still can't be translated in polite company. The second floor was where things got sophisticated. This was where the intellectual entertainment happened. Poetry competitions where scribes and scholars competed to create the most beautiful verses about love, life, and the mysteries of existence. Philosophical debates that were conducted like theatrical performances, with audiences cheering for their favorite arguments. Storytelling sessions where professional narratives would spin tales that lasted for hours and left audiences hanging on every word. But the third floor, that was Nebet's masterpiece. This was where she hosted themed events that became legendary throughout the ancient world. Egyptian mythology nights where performers dressed as gods and goddesses and acted out stories from creation myths. Historical recreations where famous battles and royal romances were performed with elaborate costumes and special effects. And cultural exchange events where entertainers from different countries would showcase their traditions in spectacular collaborative performances. Nabet herself was as much an attraction as anything else in her establishment. She'd personally greet important guests, recommend entertainment based on their preferences, and often perform herself when the mood struck her. She was known for her ability to read a crowd and adjust the evening's entertainment to match the energy and desires of her audience. Some nights were wild and raucous, others were sophisticated and artistic, but they were always perfectly calibrated to give people exactly what they needed. The business model was revolutionary for its time. Instead of just charging admission, Nabet created membership programs where regular customers could reserve preferred seating, get early access to special events, and even influence the programming by requesting specific types of entertainment. She had loyalty programs that rewarded frequent visitors with exclusive experiences and private parties. But perhaps most impressive was how she managed to operate in the gray areas between entertainment, religion, and politics. Some of her themed events were actually religious ceremonies disguised as parties. Her mythology nights weren't just entertainment. They were spiritual experiences that allowed people to connect with the gods in ways that traditional temple services couldn't provide. And her cultural exchange events weren't just fun, they were diplomatic missions that strengthened Egypt's relationships with neighboring civilizations. The network of performers who worked for Nabet reads like a who's who of ancient entertainment. She discovered talent from across the known world and gave them platforms to develop their craft. Many performers who started at her venue went on to become court entertainers for pharaohs or established their own successful venues in other cities. The competition between entertainment venues was fierce and creative. Each establishment tried to outdo the others with increasingly elaborate performances and unique experiences. The Lotus Garden specialized in outdoor entertainment with performances that incorporated the natural beauty of their riverside location. The Desert Rose featured entertainment from traveling merchants and explorers who brought music and stories from the far reaches of the known world. The Golden Scarab became famous for its themed weeks where the entire venue would transform to recreate different time periods or mythological settings. Customers could experience what it felt like to party in the time of the pyramid builders or celebrate like the gods in their heavenly realm. The attention to detail was extraordinary, with historically accurate costumes, food, drinks, and entertainment that transported guests to completely different worlds. But these weren't just businesses competing for customers. They were artistic institutions that pushed the boundaries of what entertainment could be. The innovations that came out of Egyptian nightlife venues influenced art, music, theater, and social customs throughout the ancient world. Techniques developed for evening entertainment were adapted for religious ceremonies, political events, and royal celebrations. The seasonal variations in entertainment were as sophisticated as the venues themselves. Summer programming focused on outdoor events that took advantage of the warm evenings and clear skies. Rooftop parties with views of the Nile, garden concerts where the music blended with the sounds of nature, and floating venues on barges that moved up and down the river while hosting elaborate celebrations. Winter entertainment moved indoors but became more intimate and experimental. This was when venues introduced new acts, tested innovative performance styles, and hosted the most exclusive events of the year. The close quarters and controlled environments allowed for types of entertainment that wouldn't work in larger, outdoor settings. Festival seasons were when Egyptian nightlife really reached its peak. During major celebrations like the Festival of Opet or the Festival of Bastet, the entire entertainment district would coordinate to create citywide celebrations that lasted for weeks. Venues would collaborate instead of compete, creating entertainment circuits where revelers could move from one establishment to another, experiencing different types of performances throughout the night. The logistics of these festival celebrations were mind-boggling. Venues had to coordinate schedules so that performances complemented rather than competed with each other. Food and drink suppliers had to stockpile enough provisions to serve massive crowds for extended periods. Security forces had to manage crowds that often included visitors from across the known world. The international reputation of Egyptian nightlife drew visitors from across the Mediterranean and beyond. Wealthy Romans would travel to Egypt specifically to experience entertainment that didn't exist anywhere else in their empire. Greek philosophers came to study Egyptian approaches to combining intellectual discourse with celebration. Traders from distant lands timed their trips to coincide with major festivals so they could experience the legendary Egyptian parties they'd heard about in distant ports. The cultural impact extended far beyond entertainment. Egyptian nightlife became a model that other civilizations tried to copy, but none quite succeeded in replicating the unique combination of sophistication, inclusivity, and sheer creative energy that characterized Egyptian celebrations. The influence can be traced through Roman entertainment culture, Greek symposiums, and even medieval European festivals. The economics of Egyptian nightlife were as complex as the entertainment itself. These venues weren't just profitable, they were economic engines that supported entire communities. Musicians, dancers, and performers made their living in the entertainment industry. Costume makers, instrument crafters, and food suppliers built their businesses around nightlife demand. Even seemingly unrelated industries like perfume making and jewelry crafting were largely driven by demand from entertainment venues. The taxation records that survive show just how significant the nightlife economy was to Egyptian society. Entertainment venues paid substantial taxes that funded public works, supported the military, and contributed to the prosperity that allowed Egyptian civilization to flourish. The government didn't just tolerate nightlife culture, it actively supported it because of its economic and social benefits. The social mobility that the entertainment industry provided was remarkable for the ancient world. Talented performers could rise from humble backgrounds to become wealthy celebrities. Successful venue owners accumulated fortunes that rivaled those of merchants and government officials. And the networking opportunities available in nightlife settings allowed people to form relationships that could change their entire social standing. But perhaps most fascinating is how Egyptian nightlife served as a laboratory for social innovation. The relaxed atmosphere and diverse crowds created environments where new ideas could be tested and refined. Social customs that started in entertainment venues often spread to mainstream society. Artistic innovations that began as nighttime entertainment eventually influenced religious art and royal court culture. The gender dynamics in Egyptian nightlife were remarkably progressive for the ancient world. Women weren't just welcomed as customers, they were central to the entire industry. Female performers, venue owners, and even customers had freedoms and opportunities that didn't exist in most other ancient cultures. The entertainment industry provided one of the few spaces where women could accumulate wealth, influence, and social power independent of male relatives. The religious integration was equally sophisticated. Egyptian nightlife wasn't separate from spiritual life, it was an extension of it. Many entertainment events were actually religious observances disguised as parties. The gods were understood to appreciate music, dancing, and celebration, so entertaining them through elaborate performances was considered a form of worship. The intellectual component of Egyptian nightlife set it apart from entertainment in other ancient cultures. This wasn't just about having fun. It was about engaging with complex ideas through artistic expression. Philosophical discussions happened alongside musical performances. Mathematical concepts were explored through rhythmic patterns. Astronomical observations were incorporated into seasonal celebrations. The preservation of this culture in art, literature, and archaeological remains shows how proud Egyptians were of their nightlife traditions. They didn't hide this aspect of their civilization, they celebrated it. Tomb paintings include scenes of parties and entertainment. Religious texts reference the importance of joy and celebration. Even official government records detail the planning and execution of major entertainment events. But we're still building to the most incredible part of this story, because what we've covered so far is just the foundation. The real revelations about Egyptian nightlife are still coming. We're about to explore the specific events that became so legendary they influenced entertainment culture for thousands of years. The parties that were so outrageous they're still talked about in archaeological circles today. and the entertainment innovations that were so far ahead of their time they wouldn't look out of place in a modern nightclub. We're talking about the Festival of the Drunken Goddess, an event so wild that even other Egyptians thought it was excessive. This wasn't your typical religious celebration. This was a carefully orchestrated 3-day bender that combined spiritual devotion with the kind of partying that would make modern festival organizers nervous. The entire city of Dendera would essentially shut down while thousands of pilgrims descended on the temple complex for what can only be described as ancient Egypt's answer to Burning Man. But here's what makes this festival absolutely mind-blowing. It wasn't just chaos for the sake of chaos. Every aspect was meticulously planned to create specific psychological and spiritual experiences. The first day involved ritual purification and moderate drinking to prepare participants for what was coming. Day 2 escalated with stronger beverages, more intense music, and performances that pushed every boundary of acceptable behavior. And Day 3 was when things got truly legendary. The archaeological evidence from Dendera shows preparation areas where they brewed special festival beer in quantities that seem impossible. We're talking about production levels that suggest they were serving tens of thousands of people drinks that were specifically formulated to create altered states of consciousness. These weren't just strong beers. These were carefully crafted beverages that combined alcohol with herbs and spices that enhanced the psychological effects. The performance spaces at Dendera were engineered for maximum sensory impact. The acoustics were designed to amplify music and create sound effects that seemed supernatural. The lighting systems used mirrors and torches to create visual displays that made performers appear to glow and dance in midair. And the choreography was so complex that it required months of rehearsal involving hundreds of participants. But perhaps most incredible was the audience participation element. This wasn't a performance that people watched. This was an immersive experience where the line between performer and audience completely disappeared. By the second day, everyone was part of the show. Pilgrims who had never danced before were performing complex choreography. Shy scribes were singing at the top of their lungs. Reserved priests were engaging in behavior that would have scandalized them in any other context. The transformation was intentional and carefully managed. Experienced festival guides would identify newcomers and gradually introduce them to the escalating intensity. They had techniques for helping people overcome their inhibitions without losing complete control. The goal wasn't just wild behavior, it was spiritual breakthrough through collective celebration. The stories that survive from these festivals read like mythology, but the physical evidence backs them up. Personal accounts describe experiences that sound almost psychedelic. Participants reported feeling connected to the gods, experiencing visions and achieving states of consciousness that they described as divine. And the community bonding that happened during these events was so strong that festival friendships lasted for decades. The Festival of the Drunken Goddess wasn't the only event of its kind. Similar celebrations happened throughout Egypt, each with its own character and specialties. The Festival of Intoxication at Edfu focused more on intellectual exploration through altered consciousness. The celebration of sacred madness at Kamombo emphasized healing and therapeutic release. And the Festival of Divine Ecstasy at Philae was known for its incredible musical performances that allegedly induced religious experiences. But festivals were just the scheduled highlights. The real innovation in Egyptian nightlife was the development of year-round entertainment districts that operated like ancient theme parks. These weren't just collections of taverns and music halls. These were carefully planned environments designed to create specific types of experiences. The entertainment district in Memphis was laid out like a journey through different worlds. You'd enter through the gates of joy, where street performers and musicians created an atmosphere of celebration that immediately transported you out of ordinary life. The first section featured family-friendly entertainment with games, food, and performances suitable for all ages. As you moved deeper into the district, the entertainment became more sophisticated and adult-oriented. The middle sections housed the famous music halls and dance venues where professional performers showcased their skills. The acoustics in this area were engineered so that music from different venues would blend together instead of competing, creating a complex soundscape that enhanced the overall experience. The deepest sections of the district were where things got really interesting. This was where the experimental entertainment happened. Venues that specialized in performances so innovative they didn't have names for them yet. Artists who were developing new forms of expression that combined multiple art forms in ways that had never been attempted before. The crowd flow was carefully managed through architectural design and strategic placement of attractions. People naturally moved from lighter entertainment to more intense experiences as the evening progressed. The layout prevented overcrowding while encouraging social mixing and spontaneous interactions. The variety of entertainment options was staggering. You could watch traditional Egyptian music 1 minute and hear experimental fusion pieces the next. Dance performances ranged from classical temple choreography to athletic displays that bordered on acrobatics. Theatrical productions included everything from religious dramas to contemporary comedies that satirized current events. The gaming areas were equally diverse. Traditional board games were played alongside innovative party games that required physical skill and social interaction. Gambling operations ranged from simple dice games to complex betting systems that involved multiple players and required strategic thinking. The food and drink options were curated to enhance the entertainment experience. Different venues specialized in cuisine that complemented their programming. Spicy foods were served at high-energy dance venues to enhance the heat and excitement. Cooling drinks and light snacks were available at more contemplative spaces. And special festival foods were created specifically for major celebrations. The customer service was as sophisticated as the entertainment itself. Venue staff were trained to read crowds and adjust programming in real time. If a particular type of music wasn't working, they'd seamlessly transition to something more appropriate. If a performance was getting too intense for the audience, they'd introduce elements to bring the energy down to a more comfortable level. The safety systems were remarkably advanced for the ancient world. These districts employed professional crowd managers who understood how to prevent dangerous situations before they developed. Medical staff were always available to handle alcohol-related problems or performance injuries. and security forces were trained in de-escalation techniques that could handle conflicts without disrupting the overall atmosphere. The economic model was based on creating experiences that people would want to repeat and recommend to others, instead of just extracting maximum profit from each customer. Venues focused on building loyalty and community. Regular customers received special treatment, exclusive access to new performances, and opportunities to influence programming. The international visitors were a crucial part of the ecosystem. Travelers brought new ideas, different cultural perspectives, and stories from other entertainment scenes around the Mediterranean. Egyptian venues actively courted foreign performers and adapted successful entertainment concepts from other civilizations. The cultural exchange was extraordinary. Egyptian entertainers would tour to other countries and bring back new techniques and styles. Foreign artists would come to Egypt to study Egyptian methods and often stayed to become part of the local scene. The result was a constantly evolving entertainment culture that stayed fresh and innovative. The seasonal programming was carefully planned to take advantage of different times of year. Summer focused on outdoor entertainment that utilized the warm evenings and clear skies. Winter programming moved indoors but became more intimate and experimental. Spring and fall were when major festivals happened and new acts were introduced. The training programs for entertainers were as sophisticated as any modern performing arts school. Young people could apprentice with established performers, learn multiple skills, and develop their own artistic voices. The career paths available in entertainment were diverse and could lead to substantial wealth and social status. The technological innovations that came out of Egyptian nightlife were remarkable. Acoustic engineering techniques developed for entertainment venues were later applied to temple construction and royal audience halls. Lighting systems created for performances influenced architectural design throughout Egypt, and crowd management methods developed for festivals were adapted for military and religious gatherings. The documentation systems were incredibly detailed. Venue owners kept records of which performances worked best with which audiences. Musicians documented successful song combinations and audience reactions. Even individual customer preferences were tracked so that return visitors could be provided with personalized entertainment recommendations. The artistic collaboration was unlike anything that existed in other ancient cultures. Musicians, dancers, storytellers, and visual artists worked together to create integrated performances that were more than the sum of their parts. These collaborative methods influenced Egyptian art, architecture, and literature in ways that lasted for centuries. The social impact extended far beyond entertainment. The networking that happened in nightlife venues influenced business, politics, and even international relations. Trade agreements were negotiated over drinks and music. Political alliances were formed during festival celebrations, and diplomatic relationships were strengthened through cultural exchange events. The religious integration was seamless and sophisticated. Entertainment wasn't separate from spiritual life, it was an expression of it. The gods were understood to appreciate beauty, creativity, and celebration. Providing excellent entertainment was considered a form of worship that honored divine creativity. The educational component was equally important. Entertainment venues served as informal schools where people learned about other cultures, historical events, and philosophical concepts. Complex ideas were communicated through songs, stories, and performances in ways that made them accessible to people regardless of their literacy level. The therapeutic aspects of Egyptian nightlife were well understood and deliberately incorporated into programming. Music and dance were used to help people process emotions, overcome trauma, and maintain mental health. The social connections formed in entertainment settings provided support networks that helped people through difficult times. The innovation never stopped. Egyptian entertainers were constantly developing new techniques, experimenting with different combinations of art forms, and pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The competitive environment encouraged creativity while the collaborative culture ensured that innovations were shared and refined. But we're still building toward the most incredible revelations about Egyptian nightlife, because what we've covered so far, as amazing as it sounds, is just the foundation. The real jaw-dropping stories are still coming. We're about to explore the specific individuals who became legends, the events that were so outrageous they influenced entertainment culture for millennia, and the innovations that were so far ahead of their time they seem almost impossible. We're talking about performers whose skills were so extraordinary that people believed they had supernatural abilities, parties that were so elaborate they required months of preparation and coordination between multiple cities, and entertainment innovations that were so sophisticated they wouldn't look out of place in a modern Las Vegas show. Take the legendary performer known as the Shadow Dancer, whose real name has been lost to history but whose techniques are still studied by archaeologists today. This wasn't just someone who danced well. This was an artist who developed methods of movement that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Using carefully designed costumes, strategic lighting, and choreography that required years of training, the shadow dancer could appear to float in mid-air, multiply into several figures, and transform into different shapes during a single performance. The technical requirements for these performances were staggering. Special stages had to be constructed with hidden mechanisms that could support aerial movements. Costume designers developed fabrics that would create specific visual effects when combined with torchlight and mirrors. And the choreography required not just physical skill but an understanding of optics and psychology that was centuries ahead of its time. The shadow dancers' performances were so popular that wealthy patrons would compete to book exclusive shows, sometimes paying more for a single evening than most people earned in a year. But here's what makes this really remarkable. The techniques developed for these performances influenced Egyptian art, architecture, and even military tactics. The understanding of visual perception and crowd psychology that came from entertainment was applied to temple design, royal ceremonies, and battlefield strategy. Then there was the Great Symposium of Thebes, an annual event that combined intellectual discourse with entertainment in ways that created some of the most sophisticated cultural experiences in the ancient world. This wasn't just a party with some educational elements thrown in. This was a carefully orchestrated week-long celebration that brought together the greatest minds and most talented performers from across the known world. The planning for the Great Symposium began months in advance and involved coordination between government officials, religious authorities, and entertainment venues throughout Thebes. Scholars from across the Mediterranean were invited to present their latest research and engage in debates about everything from mathematics and astronomy to philosophy and poetry. But these weren't dry academic presentations. They were performed as entertainment, with music, visual aids, and audience participation that made complex ideas accessible and engaging. The evening programs were even more spectacular. After days of intellectual exploration, the nights featured performances that brought these ideas to life through art. Mathematical concepts were expressed through dance choreography. Astronomical discoveries were celebrated with musical compositions that reflected the harmony of the spheres. Philosophical debates were dramatized through theatrical performances that made abstract concepts concrete and emotional. The networking that happened during the Great Symposium influenced intellectual and cultural development throughout the ancient world. Collaborations formed during these events led to advances in science, art, and technology that shaped civilization for centuries. The cross-pollination of ideas between different cultures and disciplines created innovations that wouldn't have been possible in isolation. The social dynamics were as carefully orchestrated as the intellectual programming. Seating arrangements were designed to encourage interaction between people who might not normally meet. Meal times were structured to facilitate conversation between scholars and artists, locals and visitors, young students and established masters. The entertainment programming included activities that required collaboration between participants from different backgrounds. The documentation from these events shows just how sophisticated the planning was. Organizers tracked which combinations of speakers and performers worked best together. They monitored audience reactions to different types of presentations and adjusted programming accordingly. They even collected feedback from participants and used it to improve future events. But perhaps most impressive was how the Great Symposium managed to maintain high intellectual standards while remaining accessible to ordinary citizens. The events were designed so that everyone could participate at their own level. Scholars could engage in deep philosophical discussions while merchants could enjoy the music and entertainment. Farmers could learn about new agricultural techniques while scribes could network with potential employers. The influence of the Great Symposium extended far beyond Thebes. Similar events were established in other Egyptian cities and eventually spread throughout the Mediterranean. The model of combining education with entertainment became a template that influenced everything from Greek symposiums to Roman festivals to medieval universities. The Great Symposium also served as a testing ground for new ideas about education and social organization. Experiments in democratic decision-making, collaborative problem-solving, and cross-cultural communication were tried out during these events and then adapted for use in government, business, and religious institutions. The economic impact was enormous. The Great Symposium brought thousands of visitors to Thebes each year, creating demand for accommodation, food, transportation, and entertainment that supported the entire local economy. Local artisans and performers gained exposure to international audiences that launched careers and created lasting business relationships. The cultural legacy is still visible today. Many of the ideas about combining education with entertainment, creating inclusive intellectual communities, and using celebration to foster innovation can be traced back to events like the Great Symposium. The Egyptian understanding that learning and joy were complementary rather than competing values influenced educational philosophy for millennia. But individual events and performers were just part of a larger system that made Egyptian nightlife the most sophisticated entertainment culture in the ancient world. The infrastructure that supported this culture was as impressive as the entertainment itself. We're talking about supply chains that could provision massive festivals, transportation networks that brought performers and audiences from across the known world, and communication systems that coordinated entertainment programming across multiple cities. The brewing and winemaking operations alone were industrial-scale enterprises that required advanced understanding of chemistry, logistics, and quality control. The textile industry that supplied costumes and decorations for entertainment venues employed thousands of people and drove innovations in fabric production and design. The instrument-making craftsmen developed tools and techniques that influenced music throughout the ancient world. The training institutions for entertainers were as sophisticated as any modern performing arts academy. Students could specialize in particular skills or develop expertise across multiple disciplines. The curriculum included not just artistic training, but also business skills, cultural awareness, and even basic medical knowledge to help performers maintain their health and deal with the physical demands of their careers. The regulatory systems were designed to maintain quality while encouraging innovation. Entertainment venues had to meet safety standards and maintain certain levels of service, but they were also encouraged to experiment with new forms of entertainment. The government provided support for artistic development while ensuring that entertainment culture remained a positive force in society. The international connections were extensive and sophisticated. Egyptian entertainment attracted visitors from across the known world, but it also sent performers and innovations to other cultures. The cultural exchange was bidirectional and constant, ensuring that Egyptian nightlife remained fresh and innovative while also spreading Egyptian influence throughout the Mediterranean. The preservation systems were remarkable for their time. Venues maintained detailed records of successful entertainment formulas, audience preferences, and performer capabilities. These weren't just business records, they were cultural archives that documented the evolution of human entertainment. Some of these papyrus scrolls survived thousands of years and still provide insights into how sophisticated Egyptian nightlife really was. The quality control was obsessive. Venue owners didn't just hire any performer who showed up. They had audition processes that were more rigorous than modern talent shows. Musicians had to demonstrate not just technical skill, but also the ability to read crowds and adapt their performances in real time. Dancers were evaluated on athleticism, artistry, and stage presence. Even servers and crowd managers had to pass tests that evaluated their social skills and crisis management abilities. The customer loyalty programs were ingenious. Regular patrons weren't just remembered, they were treated like family. Venue owners would track individual preferences, celebrate customer birthdays and anniversaries, and even provide personal services like arranging transportation or recommending entertainment at other venues. The goal wasn't just repeat business, it was creating emotional connections that made customers feel like they belonged to something special. The seasonal workforce management was equally sophisticated. During festival seasons, venues would hire temporary staff from across Egypt and beyond. But these weren't just random workers, they were skilled professionals who specialized in large-scale event management. The coordination required to bring together hundreds of temporary employees, train them on local customs and procedures, and integrate them into existing teams was a logistical marvel. The security and safety protocols were way ahead of their time. Venues employed professional crowd psychologists who could spot potential problems before they developed. They had emergency evacuation procedures, medical response teams, and conflict resolution specialists who could handle disputes without disrupting the overall atmosphere. The goal was prevention rather than reaction. The environmental considerations were remarkably advanced. Outdoor venues were designed to work with natural acoustics and lighting rather than fighting against them. Indoor spaces used ventilation systems that kept air fresh even with hundreds of people and numerous torches. Waste management systems ensured that even massive festivals didn't create health hazards or environmental damage. The technological innovations that emerged from entertainment venues influenced Egyptian society in ways that are still being discovered. Acoustic engineering techniques developed for music halls were later applied to royal audience chambers and religious temples. Crowd management methods created for festivals were adapted for military formations and religious processions. Even cooking techniques developed for entertainment venues influenced Egyptian cuisine for centuries. The artistic collaborations were unlike anything that existed elsewhere in the ancient world. Musicians from different regions would spend months learning each other's styles and creating fusion pieces that combined the best elements of multiple traditions. Dancers would develop new choreography that incorporated movements from across Africa, Asia, and the Mediterranean. Storytellers would adapt tales from distant lands and weave them into Egyptian cultural contexts. The mentorship programs were extensive and formalized. Established performers weren't just focused on their own careers, they were expected to train the next generation. Master musicians would take on apprentices who would spend years learning not just technical skills but also the business and social aspects of entertainment. The knowledge transfer was systematic and ensured that innovations weren't lost when individual performers retired or died. The international cultural exchange was constant and bidirectional. Egyptian performers would tour to other countries and bring back new techniques and ideas. Foreign artists would come to Egypt to study Egyptian methods and often stayed to become permanent parts of the local scene. The result was an entertainment culture that was distinctly Egyptian but incorporated the best innovations from across the known world. The economic multiplier effects were enormous. Entertainment venues didn't just employ performers, they created demand for dozens of supporting industries. Costume makers, instrument crafters, food suppliers, transportation providers, and accommodation services all thrived because of the entertainment economy. Some estimates suggest that nightlife-related businesses employed more people than agriculture in major Egyptian cities. The social mobility opportunities were unprecedented for the ancient world. Talented individuals could rise from poverty to wealth and fame through the entertainment industry. Successful performers accumulated fortunes that rivaled those of merchants and government officials. Venue owners became influential community leaders whose opinions carried weight in business and political circles. The therapeutic applications of entertainment were well understood and deliberately incorporated. Music therapy was used to treat everything from depression to physical ailments. Dance was prescribed for people recovering from injuries or dealing with emotional trauma. Social activities were designed to help isolated individuals build connections and support networks. The educational integration was seamless. Entertainment venues served as informal universities where people could learn about history, philosophy, science, and culture through performances and social interaction. Complex ideas were communicated through songs, stories, and visual displays that made them accessible to people regardless of their formal education level. The religious significance was profound but not heavy-handed. Entertainment was understood as a form of worship that honored the gods through beauty, creativity, and joy. Religious themes were woven into performances in ways that enhanced rather than dominated the entertainment value. The result was spiritual experiences that felt celebratory rather than solemn. The preservation of cultural memory was one of the most important functions of Egyptian nightlife. Historical events, cultural traditions, and social values were passed down through songs, stories, and performances that were far more memorable than written records. The entertainment industry served as a living library that kept Egyptian culture alive and vibrant across generations. But even with all of this sophistication, Egyptian nightlife culture wasn't static. It was constantly evolving, adapting to new influences and pushing boundaries in ways that kept it fresh and relevant. The innovations that emerged from this culture influenced entertainment, art, and social organization throughout the ancient world and continue to influence modern entertainment in ways most people don't realize. The archaeological evidence keeps revealing new aspects of Egyptian nightlife that challenge our assumptions about ancient civilizations. Recent discoveries include elaborate sound systems that could amplify music across large venues, lighting technologies that created special effects that seem almost magical, and crowd management systems that could handle thousands of people without the chaos that plagued entertainment in other ancient cultures. The papyrus records that survive tell stories of individual performers whose careers spanned decades and whose innovations influenced entertainment for centuries. Musicians whose compositions were still being performed hundreds of years after their deaths. Dancers whose techniques became foundational elements of Egyptian performance art. Venue owners whose establishments became cultural institutions that shaped their communities for generations. The international reputation of Egyptian nightlife drew visitors from across the known world. Wealthy Romans would plan elaborate trips to Egypt specifically to experience entertainment that didn't exist anywhere else in their empire. Greek intellectuals came to study Egyptian approaches to combining education with celebration. Traders from distant lands would time their business trips to coincide with major festivals so they could experience the legendary Egyptian parties they'd heard about in ports across the Mediterranean. The influence extended far beyond entertainment. Egyptian approaches to celebration, community building, and cultural expression became models that other civilizations tried to adapt to their own contexts. The techniques for managing large crowds, creating inclusive social environments, and fostering creativity through structured celebration were studied and copied throughout the ancient world. The legacy lives on in ways that most people don't recognize. Modern concepts of nightlife, entertainment districts, festival culture, and experience-based tourism all have roots that can be traced back to ancient Egyptian innovations. The understanding that entertainment isn't just frivolous fun but can serve important social, educational, and even spiritual functions is something we learned from cultures like ancient Egypt. The documentation systems that Egyptian venues maintained provide insights into human nature that are still relevant today. Their understanding of what makes people happy, how to create memorable experiences, and how to build communities through shared celebration offers lessons that modern entertainment professionals are still learning to apply. The environmental sustainability practices were remarkably advanced. Entertainment venues were designed to work with natural systems rather than against them. Waste was minimized through careful planning and reuse systems. Energy consumption was optimized through architectural design and operational procedures that maximized efficiency while maintaining high-quality experiences. The inclusivity was extraordinary for the ancient world. Egyptian nightlife culture welcomed people regardless of their social status, economic background, or cultural origin. The entertainment industry provided opportunities for social mobility and cross-cultural interaction that were rare in other aspects of ancient society. The result was a more cohesive and dynamic civilization that benefited from the contributions of all its members. So when you think about ancient Egypt, don't just picture pyramids and mummies and solemn religious ceremonies. Picture a civilization that understood something we're still trying to figure out. That celebration, creativity, and community are essential parts of human existence. That entertainment isn't just escape from reality, it's a way of engaging with reality that makes life richer, more meaningful, and more joyful. Picture cities that came alive after dark with music and laughter and performances that pushed every boundary of imagination. Picture venues that were more sophisticated than most modern entertainment complexes. Picture performers whose skills were so extraordinary that their names echoed through centuries. Picture parties that were so legendary they influenced culture across the ancient world. Picture a civilization that built monuments to the gods during the day and celebrated with them during the night. That created art that lasted millennia while also creating experiences that lived only in memory but shaped the people who experienced them for the rest of their lives. The ancient Egyptians didn't just survive, they thrived. And they did it by understanding that human beings need more than just food and shelter and security. They need beauty, creativity, connection, and celebration. They need reasons to laugh and dance and sing together. They need experiences that remind them that life is worth living and that they're part of something larger than themselves. That's the real legacy of Egyptian nightlife. Not just the parties and the performances and the innovations, but the understanding that a civilization that knows how to celebrate together is a civilization that can accomplish anything. The pyramids are impressive, but the culture that built them while also creating the most sophisticated entertainment industry in the ancient world, that's truly extraordinary. So the next time you're out enjoying nightlife in your own city, remember that you're participating in traditions that go back thousands of years. The music, the dancing, the social connections, the sense of community and celebration, all of it has roots that stretch back to those warm Egyptian nights along the Nile when people first figured out that entertainment isn't just fun, it's fundamental to what makes us human. The ancient Egyptians understood something that we're still learning, that the best way to honor life is to celebrate it. And they did that with a sophistication, creativity, and joy that made their civilization legendary not just for what they built, but for how they lived.